The moment my grandson poured sugar into my tea, I knew he wasn't trying to sweeten my life. He was testing how much control he still had over it. At 74, you learn how to read rooms the way sailors read storms. Not with fear, with memory, with instinct. And that afternoon, my living room felt like the air before lightning. My name is Eleanor Brooks, and I raised my family the old-fashioned way: casseroles, church on Sundays, and love that didn't come with a price tag. At least, that's what I thought. My son Mark hadn't visited in almost a year. Not a call. Not a postcard. Not even a lazy text on Thanksgiving. And then suddenly there he was, standing at my front door with a grocery bag, and a smile that didn't quite belong on his face. "Hey Mom," he said. "Brought you some tea stuff. Doctor says less caffeine, remember?" I didn't remember any doctor telling him that. But I smiled anyway. Because mothers are trained to smile first and ask later. He made the tea himself. Too carefully. Stirring like he was following a recipe written by someone else. And that's when he dropped 2 sugar cubes into my cup. Even though I never take sugar, I watched his eyes. Not my face. Not my hands. He was watching my reaction. I didn't touch the mug. Instead, I slid it across the table like I just lost interest. "I'll drink it later," I said. His smile twitched. "Just slightly. You've been forgetful lately," he added casually. "Doctor things, appointments, you keep missing calls." A small lie. I hadn't missed anything. But that's when I felt it. The shift. Not concern. Not love. Strategy. Mark didn't come to visit me. He came to inspect me. Like a house he wanted to sell. Later that night, after he left, I checked my answering machine. 3 new messages. All from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, this is Evergreen Senior Living. We're following up on the wellness evaluation requested for Eleanor Brooks." My hands went cold. I never requested that. Someone else did. And only one person had been in my house that day. I sat there for a long time, just listening to the old clock tick on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. Like a verdict counting down. While I was alive. Still breathing. Still thinking. Someone was already planning where to put me when I wasn't. And I had a feeling. They weren't planning on asking for my permission. Because the next morning, I discovered Mark had already signed something. With my name on it. And I never gave him a pen. I recognized my name immediately. The problem? I didn't recognize my handwriting. The paper was lying on my kitchen counter like it had always belonged there. White. Clean. Ordinary. And dangerous. Mark had been gone for 16 hours, but the silence he left behind still smelled like his cologne and bad intentions. I didn't panic. I didn't shout. I didn't even sit down. I just picked it up. Authorization for assisted care review. Evergreen Senior Living. My name typed neatly at the top. Eleanor Sue Brooks. And below it, a signature. Supposed to be mine. Except it wasn't. Mine leans a little left, the way my hands started tilting after arthritis. This one leaned right, clean, confident. Like a man signing off on a business deal. Like someone who practiced it. I slowly placed the paper down. Then I flipped it over. There were initials on the back corner. MB. Mark Brooks. My stomach didn't twist. It hardened. Because this wasn't concern. This wasn't love. This was preparation. I walked to my hallway desk. The one he probably forgot about because he always thought technology erased old habits. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out my red folder. My backup folder. Bills. Doctor notes. Important records. The ones you keep when you've lived long enough to know people don't just take from strangers. They take from family. I called the number on the paper. Evergreen Senior Living, how may I assist you? Yes, I said calmly. I'm calling about a wellness evaluation request filed under my name. A pause. Then typing. Yes, Mrs. Brooks. We have a form submitted yesterday afternoon. Did I submit it? Well, ma'am. The form was submitted online by a registered family contact. My knuckles tightened. And who would that be? Silence. Then. Your son, Mr. Mark Brooks. There it was. I thanked her and hung up like she'd just asked about my mail delivery. Then I did something Mark didn't expect. I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because he'd made his first mistake. He acted like I was already gone. But I was still very much here. So I drove. Not to his house. Not to the bank. But to the only place people like him forget to control. My lawyer. A small office downtown run by a man named Daniel Hart. Mid-50s. Sharp suit. Sharper mind. He'd helped me handle my late husband's will. I slid the paper across his desk. Did I sign this? I asked. He adjusted his glasses. Stared at the signature. Then looked directly at me. No, ma'am, he said. But whoever did, practiced. A silence settled between us. Then he leaned back. And I'm guessing you didn't ask them to. No. Iraplia. They decided for me. Daniel nodded once. Then it's time we decide back. Because that same night, Mark sent a message that changed everything. And this time, he wasn't pretending to care. Mark's message wasn't meant for me. But I read it anyway. It came through at exactly 9:18 p.m. No emojis. No love you, mom. No fake squeaknies. Just 4 words. Did she sign it? I stared at the screen long enough that it went dim. Then I tapped it to bring the light back. He hadn't even tried to hide it. I read it again, slower this time. Did she sign it? Not how are you? Not did you get home safe? Just a business transaction about my life. Typed like I was already a problem to solve. My hands didn't shake. They went very still. I typed back. Sign what, Mark? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Reappeared. Then nothing. He'd realized. He sent the wrong message to the wrong person. And I knew exactly who it was meant for. Because 5 minutes later, another text came in. Different number. No name. Just this. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I didn't answer. I let him wonder. Let him think I was scared or confused or overwhelmed like he'd planned. When the truth was, I felt clearer than I had in years. The next morning, I didn't wake up angry. I woke up prepared. I drove to the bank, the same branch I'd used for the last 20 years. The one where the manager, Mrs. Calloway, used to give my husband free pens because he still paid everything by check. I sat down in front of her. I want a detailed list of anyone who's accessed my account information in the last 6 months, I said. She frowned slightly. Is there a problem, Mrs. Brooks? Yes, I replied softly. And I'm trying to find out how much of it is my son. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. She didn't ask another question. 10 minutes later, she slid a printed sheet across the desk. My eyes moved slowly down the page. Then I saw it. Logged access. Mark Brooks. Authorized viewer. Authorized. The word sat there like an accusation. I never authorized him. Never. So how did he get access? I asked. She cleared her throat. It was submitted digitally using a copy of a legal document. A document. Of course it was. I thought about the paper on my kitchen counter. The fake signature. The fake concern. The fake tea. He wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to replace me. Not in the family. In control. That's when my phone buzzed again. A new message from Mark. Mom, don't make this messy. We just want what's best for you. I set the phone down slowly. Then I leaned closer across the desk. What happens? I asked Mrs. Calloway quietly. If I revoke everything. Her face shifted. You'd have to come in person. Good, I said. Because I am in person. Because while we were sitting there at the bank, a call came in for me. Not from Mark. Not from a stranger. But from a hospital. And they were asking about a file I never opened. The hospital asked me about my condition. But I hadn't been there in 3 years. The call came while I was still sitting inside the bank office. My phone vibrated lightly against the desk. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't a number I knew. It wasn't even local. The caller ID said, Riverside Medical Center. I answered it slowly, keeping my eyes on the bank manager like I wanted her to see the truth coming with me. Mrs. Eleanor Brooks? A woman asked. Yes, I said. I'm calling regarding your recent patient intake file. My chest didn't tighten. My jaw did. I don't have a recent patient intake file, I replied. A small pause on the other end. Then typing. We have notes here from a family member expressing concern about your memory lapses and confusion. My eyes flicked to the paper on the bank desk. Memory lapses. Confusion. That's interesting, I said calmly. Since I drove myself here, managed my finances, and made this call without any help. The woman hesitated. There was a different tone in her voice now. Your son, Mr. Brooks, contacted our office to ask about neurological screening options. Of course he did. They said you'd been forgetting where you left things, repeating stories, misplacing money. Every word was a brick he'd been stacking, preparing a wall around me. A slow one I was supposed to walk into without noticing. I'd like a copy of that file, I said. I'm afraid we can't release it without. My legal representative will be contacting you today, I interrupted. Until then, you can tag your report as contested. There was a longer silence this time. Yes, ma'am, she replied, and hung up. I placed the phone face down. The bank manager looked at me differently now, not like a sweet old lady, but like someone who just spotted a fire before the smoke. That document, I said, tapping the fake authorization sheet. Whatever he used to access my accounts. I want it frozen. She nodded immediately. And involve legal, I added. She didn't argue, because in that moment, everyone in that room understood something important. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about health. This was about control. When I left the bank, my car felt smaller somehow, like life had tightened around the edges. But not me. I wasn't shrinking. I was sharpening. That afternoon, I met Daniel Hart again. I told him everything, the hospital call, the bank access, the messages. He sat back, laced his fingers together, and sighed. They're building a case to declare you unfit, he said. For what? For your life. I stared at the window. And if they succeed? I asked. They could force oversight. Possibly supervision. In extreme cases, guardianship. Guardianship. A cage with a friendly name. I swallowed once. Then asked something else. How do I prove I'm not confused, when they're telling everyone I am? Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Then leaned forward. You don't try to defend yourself, he said. You start documenting them. Because that evening, I found something in my old photo box that changed everything. Something Mark didn't know I still had. He thought he erased my past. But he forgot I still kept the evidence. I found it in the back of my bedroom closet. Behind winter coats I no longer wore. Behind a suitcase that still had sand in the zipper from a beach trip in '96. A small wooden box. Nothing fancy. No look. Just history. Mark hadn't opened this closet in years. Too busy living his fast life. Too busy deciding when I'd slow mine down. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled the lid open. Inside were things he never cared enough to look through. Old photographs. Greeting cards. Hospital discharge papers from when his father passed. And tucked underneath it all, a yellow legal envelope. My heart went quiet. Because I knew what it was before I even touched it. The original paperwork. From almost 5 years ago. When Mark had first asked me to help him with a temporary financial situation. He was laid off. Stressed. Talking fast. Talking big. Back then I trusted him. But something told me not to throw the papers away after. And I never had. I slid them out carefully, like they were fragile glass. And there it was. The document. The one he'd told me was just temporary access. The one he swore he would never misuse. The one he based everything on. But something was different now. Because when I looked closer, the notary stamp looked wrong. Too clean. Too new. And the date? It didn't match. The timeline was off by 3 weeks. Which meant only one thing. It had been altered. I stared at it. Not in shock. In clarity. I'd spent years thinking I signed myself into a small favor. But I hadn't. I'd been slipped into a trap. My phone chimed on the nightstand. A new message. From the unknown number again. You don't need to dig into old things. Let us help you stay comfortable. My fingers tightened around the paper. Comfortable. That's what they call quiet control. That's what they call locking someone away with a smile. I snapped a picture of the document. Both sides. the edges, the stamp. Then I forwarded it directly to Daniel Hart, along with one short message. These aren't real, are they? His reply came faster than I expected. No. And this just changed everything. The next day he had me meet him downtown. Not in his office. Not in his building. But in a small conference room across the street from the courthouse. A place people go when things aren't small anymore. He laid the papers out on the table like exhibits in a trial. These were altered, he said. Notary fraud. Document manipulation. Potential forgery. Forgery. The word sat heavy. Not because it hurt, but because it made everything finally make sense. They didn't expect you to check, he added. They expected you to accept. I exhaled slowly. Well, I replied. They forgot who raised him. Daniel didn't smile, but his eyes told me he knew exactly what was coming next. Because later that same night, I heard a car outside my house. And this time, it didn't just drive by. It wasn't driving past anymore. It was waiting. I first noticed it around 8:42 p.m. A dark sedan. No headlights. No music. Just idling outside my house like a thought you can't shake. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People get lost. People make wrong turns. People check their phones. But when I looked again 10 minutes later, it was still there. Same spot. Same silence. I pulled the curtain just enough to see the outline of someone behind the wheel. Didn't recognize the face. Couldn't see much through the tinted glass. But I recognized the intention. This wasn't about directions. This was about pressure. They didn't want to break in. They didn't want a scene. They wanted me to feel surrounded. To feel watched. To feel small. But I've lived long enough to know something. Fear only works if you give it a chair at your table. I didn't give it one. Instead, I picked up my phone and made one call. Daniel. I said when he answered. There's a car outside my house. He didn't ask anything dramatic. Just one question. Is it threatening? No, irreplía. Which makes it worse. A brief pause. Stay where you are, he said. I'll make a call. So I sat. Not shaking. Not hiding. Just watching. The car stayed another 15 minutes. Long enough for my tea to cool. Long enough for the clock to click twice around. And then, it finally pulled away. Slow. Careful. Like something that didn't want to be remembered. But I have always remembered what things try to hide. And I knew something else too. You don't sit outside someone's house for no reason. Someone had sent it. And I had a good idea who. The next morning, Daniel called me back. There's been an inquiry filed, he said. In family court. I didn't bother pretending I was surprised. By who? I asked. He exhaled once through the phone. Your son and his wife. Of course. They're requesting an emergency wellness hearing, he continued. To determine if you're capable of managing your own affairs. Emergency. Like I was a building on fire. Like I was a problem they had to put out. When? I asked. 3 days. I stared out my kitchen window. Same street. Same silence. War doesn't always wear boots. Sometimes it wears paperwork. And what do they need to prove? I asked. That you're not mentally fit. A quiet laugh left my throat. And what do we need to prove? That they're lying. He paused. Then said something I didn't expect. Do you still have any direct communication from them? Yes, I replied. Messages. Calls. A few voice notes. Good, he said. Because lies collapse fastest when they hear their own voice. That afternoon my phone buzzed again. Mark. New message. Mom, things are getting serious now. We're trying to protect you from yourself. I didn't answer. I didn't block him. I let him talk. Let him write. Let him dig the hole himself. Because in 3 days, he wasn't just going to face me. He was going to face what I kept. Because the next message he sent, he never thought I'd save. And it might be the reason he loses everything. He thought his message would scare me. Instead, it became my strongest weapon. The text came in at 11:06 p.m. Not long. Not careful. And definitely not smart. You're making us do things we didn't want to do. Just cooperate, and this can all stay quiet. I didn't even blink. I just stared at it like a piece of evidence he'd handed me himself. Because that wasn't concern. That wasn't family. That was pressure disguised as peace. And pressure leaves prints. I saved it. Not in my phone. Not in the cloud. I printed it. Black ink on white paper. Something real. Something a judge could touch. Something a courtroom couldn't ignore. The next 2 days passed slow. Not because nothing happened, but because everything was building. Daniel called once in the evening. Just to remind me. Don't engage. Let them talk. Let them show who they are. And they did. Another message came in. Then another. Each one more desperate. Each one less polished. They started slipping. Talking faster. Writing sloppier. Like people losing grip on something they never owned. I saved every word. Every timestamp. Every nervous line. By the night before the hearing, my kitchen table was covered in printouts. Mark's texts. The altered documents. The hospital call log. The bank access reports. Not emotions. Evidence. And when people think you're confused, the biggest shock is when you show them how organized you really are. The courthouse was colder than my living room. Fluorescent lights. Hard chairs. Rooms that held more lies than truth. Mark and his wife, Angela, sat across from me. He didn't look like my son anymore. He looked like a man trying to manage a problem that refused to disappear. She didn't even look at me. Just gripped her little folder like it was a shield. Daniel sat beside me. Calm. Still. The judge stepped in. An older man with tired eyes and a steady voice. He looked at the paperwork. Then at me. Then at Mark. Mr. Brooks, he said. You filed this as an emergency concern? Yes, Your Honor, Mark replied quickly. My mother's been acting erratic. Forgetting important things. Making financial risks. I almost smiled. Because I knew where this was heading. Daniel stood slowly. Your Honor, he said. Before Mr. Brooks continues, we'd like to submit recent communications from him to his mother. Mark stiffened. The judge nodded. Proceed. Daniel handed over the printed messages. All of them. His words. His pressure. His tone. The judge read in silence. Page by page. No ruse. No reaction. Just reading. Finally he looked up. And asked. Mr. Brooks, is this your phone number? Mark swallowed. Yes. And did you send these messages to your mother? A small pause. A very telling pause. Yes. The judge leaned back. His expression changed. Not angry. Not shocked. Just disappointed. Then I have a few questions for you. Because the judge's next question made Mark go silent. And what happened after that? No one in that courtroom was ready for. The judge didn't ask if I was confused. He asked why my son looked scared instead. The courtroom went quiet after his question. So quiet you could hear paper breathing. Mr. Brooks, the judge said, fingers resting on the stack of printed messages. If your mother is unstable, why does every one of these texts sound like a man trying to control a decision already made? Mark opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His wife shifted. Eyes down. Hands shaking. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Brooks, he said softer now. How long have you been managing your own home and finances? I didn't hesitate. Almost 50 years, sir. And when was the last time someone else paid your bills for you? Never. A small pause. And have you ever been declared medically unfit? No. The judge nodded once, slow, deliberate. Then turned back to Mark. Mr. Brooks, filing false concerns to gain control over a competent adult's life is not protection. It's exploitation. The word hung in the air like truth does. Exploitation. Daniel didn't even look at me. He just sat calmly. Because we both knew. This was no longer a defense. It was a reckoning. I'm dismissing this petition, the judge continued. Effective immediately. Angela gasped. Mark looked stunned. But the judge wasn't finished. I'm also referring this case for further review regarding document alteration and unethical coercion. Your mother's legal representation will be advised on next steps. He turned back to me one last time. You are free to leave, Mrs. Brooks. Free. Not confused. Not supervised. Not controlled. Just free. I didn't rush out. I stood up slowly, picked up my coat, walked past Mark and Angela without looking at them. Because when someone tries to erase you, the strongest thing you can do is remain visible. Outside, the air felt lighter, crisper, like something heavy had been lifted that I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. Daniel opened the car door for me. You did this, he said quietly. No. Irraplia. He did. He just didn't think I'd survive it. That night, I returned home to my quiet living room. No cars waiting outside. No messages. No pressure. Just silence. But not the lonely kind. The earned kind. I poured myself tea. The same kind Mark tried to control. Still unsweetened. Still mine. And I sat at the kitchen table where this all started. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt something better. Clear. Because growing old doesn't mean losing power. It means knowing when to use it. And who never deserved it in the first place. Some people grow old and disappear. Others grow old and finally become impossible to erase. She wasn't confused. She was just done.